Greetings and welcome to Captain John's Almost Live Story Half Hour, brought to you from the sunny fishing village of Little River, Nova Scotia, Canada. I'm Jonathan White, and if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that my purpose behind this is to try and take you away from the madness of the world for half an hour or so. Take you to another time, another place, maybe have an adventure. Here I go. I'm going to go over the story from my third book. It's called Everyone Said I Should Write, believe it or not, a third book. And the story is called Run, Joey, Run. I hope you enjoy this. It's kind of funny and kind of scary at the same time. Okay. Run, Joey, Run. The Hotel Chew was a faded turquoise color with coral accents. It had been built a very long time ago and looked like it was ready to fall down. There was a wide and inviting veranda out back that offered a view down to the beach and across the wide bay. About 2 miles offshore was a small island, enveloped in a white mist, like a thin veil of fog. If you leaned over the wooden rail and looked right, you could just see some of the cargo ships waiting at anchor for their Panama Canal transit. When the wind blew toward Tobago Island, there was a distinct smell of guano, of fertilizer, as the offshore island was a loading point for this rich and odoriferous commodity. Our catamaran Jojo was anchored behind El Morro Point in a protected bay, and we putted around in our inflatable dinghy. We bumped ashore on a sandy beach near the rusty, covered ferry pier, and knew that the tide was falling. It was about 11 a.m. when we stepped over the dinghy thwart into warm water up to our knees. I carried the small anchor 100 feet toward the beach and buried it deep. We were already sweating in the humidity of the hot summer day as Joelle handed me our day pack. This was to be the first of many visits to this historical island, both aboard Jojo and 4 years later on Lady Hawk. The tides on the Pacific coast of Panama can be over 6 feet, and the water moves quickly. We plan to spend a few hours exploring the main town, which will give the dinghy time to float again on the incoming tide as it flowed back. Didn't quite work out that way. Now, we had left San Francisco on our 32-foot catamaran a year and a half earlier, in the fall of 1998. And we were looking forward to transiting the Panama Canal and sailing to Colombia. It will be about a month before our transit date through the canal from the Pacific to the Caribbean, and we had decided to explore this pretty little place, known as the Isle of Flowers. Joey and I splashed through the water and felt some rocks under the surface. Soon we were walking over the sandy beach to a low wall and then onto a meandering street. The small town of San Pedro sits nestled in the verdant hills, with homes looking down on the town and its central plaza. The streets are barely wide enough for one car, and there are very few of them on the island. It's a place to amble slowly, up gentle inclines, around easy corners, stopping to look at old buildings, some preserved, some crumbling. The town boasts less than 1,000 residents, and its only source of income is from the tourists who take the 10-mile ferry ride from Panama City to enjoy the beach in crystal clear water. It gets crowded on the weekends, but today it was empty, and the streets were barren, except for a few locals going shopping or sitting in the shade. We rambled up a winding road, stopped at a small booth to buy ice cream, then found ourselves in the Central Plaza, typical of many small towns throughout Central and South America. It was dominated by the whitewashed Iglesia de San Pedro, supposedly the second oldest church in the Western Hemisphere. Inside it was cool and quiet, and we could feel the energy of centuries of prayer. There were the typical garish statues with white-skinned saints condescending to a conquered, brown-skinned populace, a concept we always found hard to reconcile. Leaving the coolness of the church, we emerged into the plaza in the heat and continued our slow amble up and down the narrow, winding streets. Lemon trees, orange trees, bright, vivid bougainvillea exquisite orchids, climbing flowering plants, lush ferns. Everywhere was colour, as the Isle of Flowers lived up to its name. We came upon the remains of a sanitarium with a small plaque stating that the artist Paul Gauguin had spent time recuperating there after his stint working on the construction of the Panama Canal. Isla Toboga was a place where French and later American workers would rest and recover after the strenuous and dangerous excavations in the malaria-ridden swamps to build the canal. But many died, over 30,000, mostly from disease. We were thirsty now and hungry. Heading up the street along the beach, we strolled past an old, two-faded building overlooking the water with a weather-beaten sign announcing the Hotel Chu. It had two large doors which were closed. I turned the door handle and pushed. It moved a couple of inches, stuck on what was probably a warped floorboard, then opened fully as I pushed harder. We could see a couple of people inside, so when we went, hoping to get a cold beer and maybe some lunch. An ancient Asian man shuffled over to us and pointed through a large room set with rickety tables to the outside veranda, where a few people sat at more rickety tables under large fans, which sluggishly moved the hot, muggy air. Then he scuffled off somewhere in the back and we heard a door close. Always open to new experiences, we looked at each other, shrugged, and walked across the dining room, the old uneven floor creaking at every step. Onto the veranda we went and leaned on the balustrade, looking down the beach and the receding tide. To the left, a mile down the beach, the old ferry pier jutted out into the sparkling water, and our dinghy was now probably high and dry close to it. I leaned further over and saw the veranda was supported by old rotted wooden beams, crudely held together with crisscrossed pieces of various sized lumber. Judging by the antique moulding in the dining room, the old bar, and the uneven floors, Gauguin himself might have rested here and sipped an anisette at the Hotel Chu 100 years ago. We sat at a long table covered by a greasy plastic tablecloth, with benches on both sides gazing out at the bay. A disinterested Panamanian waitress came over and took our order, looking blankly everywhere but at us. I glanced around at the other couple of tables. One had a group of locals in the corner drinking beer, eating noodles and playing dominoes. The only other occupied table had a lone guy, muscular, in his mid-30s, blonde, a bottle of Stolichnaya and a glass in front of him. He was looking at us, and I nodded. He smiled back and raised his glass. Occasionally, we caught a whiff of guano, and I pulled my binoculars out of my pack and focused them on the little island a couple of miles away. There was a battered old freighter tied up to a battered old dock, and an ancient crane was turning, dipping, turning back, and dumping great quantities of fertilizer into the hold. A white coating of guano dust hovered over the island, reminiscent of Pigpen in the Charlie Brown comics. The man who had acknowledged us picked up his bottle and glass, pushed his chair noisily back, and, uninvited, weaved over to our table and plonked himself down on our bench next to Joel. He was tall, probably 6'4", Slavic-looking, muscular, tattooed, drunk. "Hello?" he slurred. "Speak English?" I nodded slightly, not wanting to encourage him. Joel looked straight ahead, uncomfortable with his proximity. "Me name Ivan from Russia," he informed us proudly, raising his glass and gulping a shot of vodka. "You like vodka?" Before I could answer, he yelled at the waitress in rudimentary Spanish to bring another bottle of Stoli and 2 glasses. I started to protest, but he didn't care. He wanted to party, and he wanted to party with us. As Ivan edged closer to Joel on the bench, I got the feeling he'd prefer to party with Joel without me. He slopped some Stoli into 2 glasses for us, and in the spirit of détente, we smiled, toasted something in Russian, and chugged them down. Our beer and lunch arrived, and we hoped he would have enough sense to go away, but of course he didn't. "See ship there?" he asked, pointing to the freighter loading guano offshore. That's my ship. I the mate on ship, he said proudly. We didn't want to encourage him, but I also didn't want to piss off a tall, muscular, drunk Russian. Oh yes, guano? I asked rhetorically. Da, guano. Very good cargo. Smell bad, ha ha. We nodded our heads. The smell of bird crap wafted around him, reinforcing his comment. Now, we drink. Have party, da? As he edged closer to Joelle and put his arm around her shoulder. His eyes were unfocused, glassy, and also steely. He looked dangerous, and with his box of physique, undoubtedly was. He inched closer to Joelle, right up next to her, acting as if I wasn't there. Joelle glanced at me questioningly. Yvonne had taken a shine to her, and the fact that she was with me fazed him not. He squeezed her shoulder. I opened my mouth to say something that would have led to a confrontation when Yvonne stood and put one of his legs over the bench, holding onto the table with two shaking arms. I thought he was going to attack me and started to get up, my legs like jelly, but not from too much vodka. I go toilet now. You drink vodka. Very good, da? He said as he stumbled to get up. Okay, Yvonne, take your time, I said with a smile on my face. He slapped me on the back as he staggered by, looked down at Joelle and gave her a big wink. He hiccuped and bounced off the door jamb, heading inside to find the men's room. Okay, Joey, this could develop really quickly into a dangerous situation. I don't want to get into a fight with this asshole. No, you're right. We could spend a night in a Panamanian jail until they sorted it out. And they're so corrupt here it could cost us a bunch of money. Well, let's get out of here now. As Joey stood up and pushed it back, the bench fell over, making a loud clatter. I hoped it wouldn't alert our Russian protagonist. I hurriedly reached into my pocket and removed a crumpled wad of money, pulling out a $20 bill and stuffed it into the hand of the implacable waitress who was passing by. I grabbed Joey's hand and pulled her toward the front of the hotel. She didn't need any encouragement. There were 4 doors along the hallway, 2 of the restrooms on the left and a staircase along the opposite wall, heading to rooms above. We could hear someone in the room labeled Hombres and hoped the door wouldn't open as we tiptoed past. The double front doors were ahead, and I pulled it aside. I pulled out on the handle. It didn't budge. Someone had locked it, which I thought was pretty strange, as the hotel and restaurant were still open. I let go of Joelle's hand, turned the key and pulled again. The door moved a few inches, then stuck on the warped floorboards. We heard the sound of a toilet being flushed. Yvonne was finished, and we were just feet from him, trying to get out. Well, it gets more and more bizarre. Anyway, that's the end of part 1. Part 2 is in the Facebook text, the link to it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like it, and I'll see you in a couple seconds.